This is Javier from Proactive Dog Training, and I'm going to talk about the walk. There's several different aspects that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a game, which is basically going to be a touch exercise. We're going to talk about stopping and two different methods to get the dogs to stop. And then we will talk about how you're going to get your dog's attention once you start taking this to the real world. And one additional thing will be talking about the communication system and the ways to reward and correct your dog. How to give it feedback so they understand that they're doing something right or that they're doing something wrong. So the first part is the touch exercise. All you're gonna do is you're gonna get a treat, put it in your palm, and you're gonna use your straight fingers. That will be part of the cue that will let the dog know if you touch this, you're gonna get rewarded. And we will use that for other commands. It's going to be using a different hand and a different angle, but it's going to be a very similar concept. So use your hands, and then you're going to hide a treat right here, right where your palm is. With your thumb, and you're going to close it and leave the treat right there. Okay, so you're going to then put that hand back behind you. So you're gonna put your hand flat, your arm next to you on your left, and the hand is gonna be flat and stretched. That is gonna give the signal that the dog, if they touch that, they're gonna get rewarded. Okay, but right now there's no name for it. You're not gonna say walk just yet. You're gonna first get the dog to realize you have a treat there, and if they touch it, just sniffing, they're gonna get a yes, and then you're gonna let them have that treat. So go towards your dog, turn around, put your arm next to you with your fingers flat and that hidden treat on your thumb. If the dog goes to sniff it and you feel any sort of touch, say yes and give them a treat. Do that a few times, walk away from your dog, do the same thing. They touch it, yes and treat. So after you do that a few times, what I want you to do is then you can start naming it. So before you flatten your hand and show that treat, you're gonna say your dog's name. So let's say Fluffy. So Fluffy, walk, then flatten your hand. So on your left side, so they can come touch you. They're touching you. The palm is facing back behind you. So they're coming from behind. So you won't necessarily see the dog, but you will feel the nose as soon as they touch you. You'll say yes and give them a treat. That is a great way to get your dog's attention. It's basically a come to heel without the complicated part of the dog doing a turn to position themselves, which that you can add later on. It's no problem. But the simplicity of this game makes it so in one session you can get a dog to understand that every time you say walk, they come to touch and they're going to get rewarded. So very, very simple exercise. This is not obedience per se, in the sense of you're gonna make it happen anyway. You're just gonna play this game, so it's gonna be shorter sessions. And then if your dog is kind of distracted, you just have to up the value of your reinforcer. You're not gonna correct them so they can come touch it. This is a voluntary thing for your dog to do. It's not necessarily adding pressure for your dog to understand what you expect. All right, so now we are gonna talk about stopping. So in order to get your dog to pay attention to your pace, to follow you when you speed up, when you slow down, you need to teach them how to stop. So there's two ways for that. First way is going to be luring. So the ideal position of your dog when they're heeling is going to be next to you with their paws at your heel. And I typically teach it on the left side. But their paws have to be at your heel. The benefit of that is that it allows the dog to be able to see you without looking at you directly, because you're kind of like in their field of view, even if they're looking straight. That is going to be helpful because the dog won't necessarily be walking like this the whole time. You don't really want that for a mile walk. So you're going to have your dog on your heel. Basically, their front paws at your heel. So that's the position. Now we're going to talk about, again, stopping. So you're going to grab a treat with your right hand. At this point, your dog is on your left side, paws at your heel. So in order to give the treat to the dog, and you want to bring it to your dog, you don't want your dog to come get it, because if your dog comes to get it, then pretty quickly they're going to anticipate that treat to be given next by twisting or by going towards it. So you're going to get dogs, especially food motivated dogs, they're going to keep inching forward. They're going to keep crossing you in order to get that reward. So you're going to bring the treat to them. So the first part, you're going to twist a little bit so you can have the treat in front of the dog. So this is your right hand, and the treat is in front of the dog. You're going to start walking, take 1, 2 steps. The dog is interested in that treat. But as you're taking, let's say, your third step, and that's when you're going to stop, you're going to start lifting that treat slowly. What that does is, if the dog is looking at it, it will automatically look up and probably stop and possibly sit down. If they do, say yes and treat. Do that a few times. Stick to a number. So if you start with 2 or 3 steps, stick to that until you can start not having the treat quite as close. You're not twisting quite as much. Perhaps you have your treat on your chest like that, and then you just lift up a little bit, and then you have the treat all the way on the other side. But the dog now makes the connection that it's not just following the treat, it's stopping when you stop. This part is getting the dog to stop by using some leash pressure or compulsion. So what you're going to do is you're going to have your dog, you're going to tell your dog to, once they know how to stop, whether you did luring, or if not, don't worry about naming it yet. Let's make it happen with the leash first. So your dog is not interested in treats, let's say. So you can't do the luring. It doesn't work. So what you're going to do is going to be something very simple. You're going to work on a mechanical stop. A mechanical stop is when you stop your dog 2 times in a row, and then you test to see if he'll stop on his own. So let's pick 3 steps. You have the dog on a leash, again, starting with those paws at your heel. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take a few steps. So let's say 1, 2, 3. As you're taking that 3rd step, I want you to stop the dog. So he stops basically when you stop, and a little bit behind you. Because if you delay it, if you stop him after you stop, then your dog is going to be ahead of you. So you want to keep him a little bit behind. So take a few steps, stop him, and stop. Take a few steps, stop him, and stop. When you do that 2 times in a row, the 3rd time it's likely that the dog is anticipating that. So you can loosen up that leash and test it. Take those 3 steps, and if your dog stops, great. You can reward him. If your dog does not stop, then you will say no, apply some leash pressure, and bring him back. And then try again. What might be happening could be a few things. 1, there's too many distractions, so your dog is not focused, not putting his mind into it, or it might be too difficult for your dog. So if that's the case, I just want you to keep practicing, do a few more mechanical stops, maybe more than 2, and then test it. You can also, if your dog is just not caring, you can add a little bit more firmer stop. So a firmer leash to stop the dog. So it's a little more surprising. He's like, oh, okay, I gotta pay attention. So that is a mechanical stop. Just remember to test it. A lot of times we give the false perception that the dog is truly getting it and stopping, but we, without intention, have been putting a tiny bit of pressure. So we want him to stop without any pressure at all. So we can reward when he does that. So also the 2 ways of getting your dog to stop. It's going to be rewarding your dog. There's going to be 3 main ways. One way is you say yes and give the treat behind. I usually have my treat bag on my right side, and I grab it with my right hand and pivot to give my dog the treat like that, where they are on the heel position. That's if you say yes. So if I say yes, I grab the treat and give the treat behind. So that's one way. Make sure that your dog doesn't cross you to get that treat if you say yes. If you say good boy, that's a form of feedback. You're just telling your dog you're doing the right thing. If you say free, then I want you can toss him a treat, give him a treat wherever it is. Let him go to the right, to the front, to the back, zigzag. He can do whatever. This is his free time. He just earned it. Especially he did something really good. He just figured out a difficult puzzle. He was barely responding, and finally he's like, is this it? I want you to say free and party with him. Treats, play, freedom, sniff around, run around, do all that stuff so your dog knows, oh, I like playing this game. So next time you say walk and he's paying attention to you, he stops with you, then you can celebrate that way. Now, once he's getting it, you can sometimes do yes and treat so you can keep going. You don't have to interrupt every single time, but you will use those interruptions to celebrate when he gets it right. What do you do when your dog is not paying attention? So if your dog is not paying attention, and let's say that you have moved on to doing 10 steps, and he's usually been pretty consistent, pretty successful at doing that. So you take 10 steps, he stops, you say yes and treat, or you say free, or you say good boy. Now, let's say that you're doing those 10 steps, but now the dog is getting a little distracted. This is where our communication and feedback on the negative side comes into play. If he's getting a little ahead, and some pressure back. It's going to be a little pop and a little leash pressure back. Now, if he sees a leaf and darts, that'll be a no and a greater consequence. That will depend on the dog. It can be a poke, it can be a harder leash correction, it can be spray water, it can be anything that he has, that he understands and he has been introduced to. I wouldn't go to introducing a brand new tool in this context, because you are, at this point, you're really just showing your dog that that's wrong. You're not really trying to create an aversion to it. It's not like jumping on the counter. That one, you're going to do a higher correction pretty early on. For the walk right now, it's just going to be some pressure, some annoyance that starts and goes away. It starts if he's off position and goes away when he comes back in position. So we're still in the negative reinforcement side. So that's what you're going to do when your dog breaks. I wanted to talk a little bit about once you start moving on from a controlled environment, meaning your house or driveway or wherever, somewhere where there's not too many distractions, and you want to move on to the real world, you're going to be doing 180 turns, and we call that the relevance exercise. So what you're doing is you're going to take, let's say, 5 steps. Your dog gets ahead. We typically say no and correct him and bring him back. But that likely won't work once you have distractions, and you're not going to be doing heavy corrections yet. So what I want you to do is, instead of like having to do a high correction, just say no, do a correction, a normal correction, just a leash correction, and then turn around, do a 180. Usually to your right, because to your left, that's focusing more on position. To the right, the dog has to pay attention and turn towards you. So you do a 180 to your right, and then keep walking, and then maybe slow down. If your dog slows down with you, you can reward. If he does not, then no, same thing. He got ahead, to a 180. Most dogs, because it's very, very annoying because they get nowhere because you keep turning. Within 2 to 3 times that you turn, then they're going to start looking at you. As soon as they do, reward that. Yes, treat, free, or good boy. Typically, I would go for a free at that point, because it's a big thing. You just went out, there's distractions, and now your dog's paying attention to you. So celebrate that, and then restart what you were doing in controlled distractions. As you get better, get more steps, work against different distractions, then you're gonna find yourself needing to correct less or guide your dog less and reward less frequent. So typically, in order to fade out the input, what I want you to do is go up on your intensity of your corrections and also go up on the value of your reinforcer. If you do both, then what will happen is you will get a lot better reliability, because now your dog is actively trying to avoid breaking position and actively trying to do the right thing so he can get his freedom, so he can get his treats. If your dog understands how to play that game, then it's going to be relatively simple to take them places and be able to tell them walk, and they walk properly until you release them. So